And welcome back to another episode of the GSMC Basketball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I am your host, Nelson, and today we are going to be doing 3 segments. As always, we are going to talk about the games that happened all over the weekend, the Lakers, their matchup against Golden State, Embiid choosing to sit out of the Nuggets game, the Pistons actually winning a game, all of this stuff that happened over the weekend, and we also have a 4th segment, as always, so stick around and figure out what that segment is. I ask that you remember to follow and to subscribe to the show. If you want to become a member or part of the show, there is a link in the description, and this is the part of the show where, as always, I remind you all to please tip and donate. Make sure you get your comments recognized. The link is streamelements.com/gsmcsportsnetwork./tip. It is displayed right below underneath the ticker and in the description blocks. Really helps make the show much more interactive between myself, the host, and you guys, the viewers. Once again, the link is streamelements.com/gsmcsportsnetwork./tip. And with that, let us go ahead and begin with these segments. So, there was a lot of things that happened in the previous night. Hold on, because my audio is a little bit too loud, and I don't want you guys, don't want anyone's ears to be hurting afterwards a little bit. So, all right, that should be good. But, anyways, there was a lot of games that went on, and there's a lot to talk about. And surprisingly, they didn't even not much of them made that many headlines on the internet, simply because of how popular football was and how much that was going on over Sunday. Everyone was more hyped about football than they were focusing on certain basketball games. But I'm here for y'all, so y'all don't got to worry about that. Let's begin. We start out with Lebron versus Stephen Curry. This was arguably the most. Actually, you know what? Forget about that. I'll pick up on before I start on LeBron and Curry. I'll pick up on Luka Doncic scoring 73 points and getting that win against the Atlanta Hawks, the team that traded him away. Now, obviously, Luka scoring 73 points. Joel Embiid scored 71 the other night, and now he just immediately breaks that and scores 73. The Atlanta Hawks lost in a pretty close game, and it took Luka Doncic 73 points in order for them to only win by 5. So that goes to show you where I think this team goes if Kyrie doesn't play, and if Luka continues to have to carry this team. They're absolutely terrible without him. It does not make any sense. These are the numbers that he put up in this game are literally numbers ripped right out of 2K. He played out of his mind. But regardless, speaking of 2K stats, let's talk about the greatest player of all time, LeBron James. Yes, I stand by that. I don't care. This weekend was extremely the most hyped matchup. Not for football, but just for basketball as well. There was a lot of games that had some intense matchups this weekend. The Knicks went against the Heat. The Kings went against the Mavs. The Clips went against Boston. Pelicans went against the Bucks. Just to name a few. I'll go over some of those games later on in the segments, but that's just to name a few for now. Before I begin, though, I just want to say that, obviously, if you could not tell, I am a huge LeBron fan, and a lot of what I might say... Well, I wouldn't say that. A lot of what I might say might make it it might sound like I'm talking bad about Steph Curry and his legacy, but I'm really not. There's a difference between stating facts and actually criticizing some athletes. If you're stating a fact, it shouldn't be considered criticizing, but a lot of people do. So I just wanted to say that I'm not criticizing him and I'm not trying to slander him or anything. I am just stating clear-cut facts. And if you think they contain bias, go right ahead. But you don't have to take it seriously if you don't want to. But I personally don't think it would contain bias. That's just me, however. So let's get back onto the matchups where we have Bron and Curry, arguably the most famous NBA players out. You don't need to know basketball to know that these guys exist. Their reputation speaks for themselves. They've matched up against each other 4 straight times in the NBA Finals, one of the most iconic sports rivalries in NBA history and in the history of everything. Curry won the first matchup but LeBron ended up winning the second matchup in the most iconic way by coming back 3-1 in the NBA Finals. Probably the greatest comeback in NBA history, and maybe even world history, who knows. But part of what makes this rivalry so iconic was at the second half of the rivalry, where Kevin Durant makes the move of deciding to join Golden State in free agency, essentially guaranteeing Golden State a final spot and arguably a finals win. They lost so bad in that series in 2016 that they recruited KD, who is second only to LeBron in small forwards for that decade. That is still insane to me, because because of this, I usually tend to put a little asterisk on those two finals, simply because most of their matchups against the other teams, most of Golden State's matchups, were unfair. They came one game away from sweeping the entire league, and that one L was obviously against LeBron, because who else was it going to be against? But I digress. Since LeBron lost 3 out of the 4 series against Golden State, there's always the talk that LeBron can't really beat Steph in the finals when it really matters, and they sort of use Steph Curry's record over LeBron in the playoffs as leverage to sort of prove that LeBron is not the greatest and Steph Curry is better than him, or Steph Curry is better than him. It's either or, one of the two. But the reason why this is such a problem is that they do this without taking into account any type of context. They just look at the record count and think that's it. In all things, in everything, especially in sports, you need context. And saying that he is better because he had a better team is just unfair. Not to mention Kyrie Irving suffering a serious injury to his kneecap in 2015, and Kevin Love getting injured in Boston. And obviously, as a Bron fan, I know this, but recently, LeBron's been getting the best out of Curry in these matchups. So the argument is starting to look a lot more apparent that the only reason why Steph was able to beat LeBron was because of the stacked teams that he's always been luxurious enough to play on. Now, is it his fault? No, obviously. I mean, Kevin Durant joining him was probably his fault, honestly, because what they did was they went over to after blowing the 3-1 lead, Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, and Draymond Green all went over to the Hamptons and tried to recruit Kevin Durant. So he kind of played a part into that, but obviously, it was mainly Kevin Durant's fault. But recently, LeBron has been getting the best out of Curry in these matchups. And when they're on an even playing field, LeBron has gotten the best out of Curry several times. And this is the first time that both players have matched up against each other with both teams being either 500 or below. And the last time they matched up was in round 2 of the playoffs last year, where the Lakers won 4-2. And again, the teams were relatively even because they were, I believe they were both play-in teams at one point. Nobody had no, they weren't both play-in teams. My bad. The Lakers were the only play-in team, but the Warriors were the 6th seed and the Kings were the 3rd seed. Yeah, pardon me for that little mistake, but both teams were relatively even, and at that point, and none of them had a clear-cut advantage over the other, because Golden State was going through locker room problems, Draymond Green punching Jordan Poole, that kind of stuff. So this matchup was very highly expected, and it ended up in a double overtime of ending in 145 to 144. LeBron ended with 30 points, 20 rebounds, and he ended with 36 points, 20 rebounds, and 12 assists. Became the oldest player to record numbers like that, by the way. And D'Lo continued to hoop, scoring 28 points. And Anthony Davis ended with 29 and 13. Which, obviously, if you're the Lakers, it doesn't sound that bad. But, again, they've only won by 1 point. And it took them 2 overtimes to do that. Steph ended with 46 and hit a couple clutch shots to send the game deeper in overtime, but it wasn't enough. This team, it's his turn to know, this time it's his turn to know how it's like to drop 40, and it doesn't mean anything because your team's not good enough. Now it's Steph Curry's time to know what that feels like. Clay was inefficient this game, scoring 24 on 24 shots. What I find funny is that, like, while Draymond might not score the ball, he does everything else so well. He ended with a box score of plus 31, and they still lost. Like, ending with a box score of plus 31 is so difficult to do. And, like, the fact that he's not even, like, scoring when while that's happening, or, like, he's not the main scorer while that's happening, is even more insane to me. Every time that he's on the court, the Warriors ended up outscoring the Lakers. So he should have stayed on there for the whole game. Having the box score in that loss, it's just insane. But the game ended with the ball going to LeBron. So when you put LeBron in those type of situations, he delivers almost every single time. He got fouled going up, and he drilled both free throws to ensure that they take the lead. And that's how the game ended. But as the Lakers, even with this win, like, they're still in such a really bad spot. It took LeBron playing 48 minutes and dropping those ridiculous Wilt type numbers that I told you. Well, not really Wilt, I guess you could say. Those insane numbers that I told you about, those ridiculous, that 36-20. It took him 36 and 20 just for them to win by 1 point and 2 overtimes. The same could be said about Steph and the Warriors right now. It took Steph 46 points and a bunch of missed shots and a bunch of made shots just for them to lose by 1 point to a really bad Laker team. The Lakers, again, didn't have many players come off the bench. Only 4 of them came off the bench. So I have no idea what in the world the rotations are going on, what they're going to be for the playoffs. I don't know what Darvin Ham is. I don't know what he's doing. I don't know what the move is. I don't know if they they're in, like, no real position to, like, make a very good trade for a very good player, in my opinion, unless they make some, like, ridiculous, like, 3-team trade and get everyone involved or something like that. But I don't really see them making one. They had Prince end the game with, like, 0 points and 4 fouls, and he was one of the starters. Like, first of all, why is he out there? And then second of all, how do you expect to trade that? Like, how do you expect to trade value like that? You can't. This team is, like, it's lucky that they have LeBron. They would literally I wouldn't be surprised if this team, they also have Anthony Davis, so that might help too, but I wouldn't be surprised if this team fell to, with the way Anthony Davis has been playing recently, I wouldn't be surprised if this team fell all the way down to one of the worst teams in the league, even with Anthony Davis on the team, simply because of their terrible roster, their rotations, and the fact that nobody on that team can, like, run a legitimate offense, in my opinion. This win puts the Lakers positive by 1, which is good enough for the 9th seed. Even though, like, I harp on the Lakers for being not that good of a team, they're still the 9th seed, but they're primarily the 9th seed because of LeBron and Anthony Davis constantly showing up every game. Without them, they wouldn't be nowhere near as good as what they are now. Like, obviously, when you could say that about, like, every team, but it is just most apparent with the Lakers. It is the most apparent. It's the LeBron effect. Well, like, so I might have been aggressive and, like, make it seem like they're way worse than what they actually are, but they might be the 9th. But, like, the West is so close that, like, they could move all the way up to 6 if they just win, like, 4 in a row. That's a possibility. And, like, if the other teams, like, they lose some games, then they can move up in the seedings. But, like, the fact that all they have to do is win 4 games, and they're in the playoff spot just like that, it's not even that bad. Like, and before All-Star break, pre-All-Star break, not bad. The reason I'm so tough on them is because of their lineups and their rotations. Like, they aren't where they should be compared to, like, other teams. The same could be, like, the Warriors have a different problem. Their problem is that their talent is lacking. They've had several close games, yes, but they don't necessarily meet the moment in the fourth all that much. Klay Thompson has been a little inefficient, but recently there have been some positives coming by, like Jonathan Kuminga and Andrew Wiggins. They've been playing a little bit better, so maybe they could go on a nice little post-All-Star run to clinch a playoff spot, or maybe they could, like, make some noise in the play-in game and make it to the playoffs that way. But they've I don't know. Like, it's really, it's tough with those teams because I never like to rule out Steph or LeBron James simply because of, like, how every single time, like, I think they're not going to make it, or, like, I think they're not going to win, they end up winning in the end. So I always tend to just wait until, like, I know that their time is up for sure before, like, I rule them out indefinitely. So it's like, it's really difficult for me to weigh in this situation right now because I don't think the Warriors have enough of anything to be able to remain effective at the way that they're playing right now. Like, unless the Stars bring in, like, that production, there's no hope. There's absolutely no hope whatsoever. But with that, we are going to take a short break real quick, and we are going to go into the second segment where we talk about Joel Embiid and him being scared of Denver. So I will be right back.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits, I'm losing shit. A stupid myth, you choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. Oh.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
And we are back with the second segment of the GSMC Podcast. We have actually, you know what? I'll do that a little bit later. Hold on just one second. I'll acknowledge the comments coming in from one of our viewers later. But before I acknowledge that, I'd like to remind everyone to please tip and donate. It really makes the show much more interactive between myself, the host, you guys, the viewers. The link is streamelements.com/gsmcsportsnetwork./tip. Again, like I said earlier, makes the show much more interactive. The link's in the description below, and the link is also displayed at the bottom of the ticker. And with that, I will go and break into the next segment. But before I talk about this next segment, there's a comment that I'd like to recognize right after I pull it up real quick. A. Tate was wondering if I thought that the Lakers should include Austin Reeves in a trade. That's a little bit tricky because it's like Austin Reeves is he's sort of like their culture player, if that makes sense. He's like a player that he's a fan favorite and everyone loves him. So it's like if you remove him from that locker room, it might be like it might be a little bit difficult for like the rest of the team to get that chemistry that they like, because I know LeBron likes Austin Reeves, but LeBron likes everyone, but like if he if you were to take D'Lo out of that locker room, like the reaction would probably be a little less like, damn, he really got traded, compared to like with Austin Reeves, because Austin Reeves being a fan favorite of like from all of his fans and all of the players, it's like they're just like he's almost like immune to being traded at that point. But I don't think they should include him in a trade specifically for that reason, just because like he might be the Lakers like that thing that holds them together in the locker room, because like you need that. And obviously like D'Angelo Russell, he's not really one to be trusted in the locker room with his little beef with Nick Young. So personally, I'd rather see D'Lo get traded. But the thing is, like, right now, D'Lo is playing good. For like he got put on the trade block, and he's like, whoops, now I gotta remember how to play basketball. It's like, why can't you just play basketball normally like before? But I digress. So I don't think they're going to include Austin Reeves in the trade. I think they still need like a guard that can actually that depends on like what they trade for. So if they get DeJounte, then I wouldn't be surprised if they would trade away Austin Reeves for that. If they end up getting Zach LaVine, then maybe not. Simply because, like, DeJounte is, like, he's that playmaker, he's also that scorer, and he's that defender that fills in the role well, in my opinion. And Zach LaVine might not fit into that playmaker role as much as I would think. Like, LeBron he's old. So, he might be a point guard, and he might be a point guard, like, right now, but he's old. So, forcing him to do everything on offense, not the best idea. Especially when he has to do it consistently over and over and over again. Like, you're just asking him to get hurt. I don't think it's the best idea. But that's my opinion on that take. Again, like, anything could happen. If they trade for a guard, they probably would include Austin Reeves in that trade if it was for DeJounte. And maybe a couple of picks, but we'd have to see later on. But on the same day that LeBron is set to play Steph, Embiid is set to play Jokic, and they were expected to match up in Denver for a very and this is obviously like a very anticipated matchup because the last time they matched up, Joel Embiid got the better out of them at home, but now Joel Embiid is on the away side. This is the problem with Embiid, however. He, for some reason, the last 3 years, he has refused to play in Denver. Absolutely refused. It's been since November of 2019 that Embiid has played a game in Denver. Like, the injury update happened 15 minutes before the game even started. So I personally don't even think he was injured. Like, he just decided to sit out, which absolutely confuses me, because why do you sit out in such an anticipated matchup in an away game? Like, you just beat him at home. Now why don't you want to try and beat him in his own home court? Because the stipulation around him is like he can beat Jokic, but he only beats him at home. So it's like, what happened? We don't see Jokic when he's away. So like, obviously, like, the numbers for Jokic are going to look a lot nicer because like he's always the home team. It's like he refuses to play in the Nuggets at home, and I don't understand why. Like, many other people don't understand this either and are quick to calling Embiid a coward, calling him soft. In my opinion, he kind of is for this very weak move. Like, I might just be upset because like I was really looking forward to that matchup, but like he just chose not to play, and I just don't like that and when it happens to any player, like when they just choose not to play and they can play, I don't like it. It leaves a sour taste in my mouth. It can't be that like you'll play him every time whenever you're like the home team, but whenever he's the home team, then he just decides not to play. Like, if he ever matches up against him in the finals, is he going to do that same thing? Is he going to just not play Game 3? Is he just going to not play Game 1 and 2 because they're in Denver, and then he's going to come back in Game 3 and 4 and try to make a comeback? Like, seriously? Is that what he's trying to do? Like, no, you gotta be good in both home and away. Like, doesn't make any sense to me. But that's just me. Like, he has gotten the better of him in several matchups, but again, they only come at home. So it's like you can't really like give him that much. Like, you can give him credit for it, obviously, because of how well he's out-dueling him and such, but home court really gives you an advantage. It could completely shift several games. Like, home court is a serious advantage, and Embiid knows this because he doesn't want to play in Denver's home. Like, it's insane to me how he doesn't even want to play. I don't get it. And like, all on top of this, like, this is like a very low blow. It doesn't like help that his play style like isn't that admirable either, because it's like the low blow that I mentioned earlier is like because he's always the home team, so his numbers are just going to be better. Like, that's just a very low blow, because in arguments, when people try to argue if Joel is better than, or if Jokic is better than Joel, then people are going to point to the matchups and say, but look, Joel has outplayed him several times, right? I feel like that makes sense. And not to mention, it's that and his play style that isn't really admirable either that makes him like the main center of focus, especially like not just being the best player on the team, but it's the fact that he does this all the time and he gets hate for it all the time. Like it's like all of this like the softness and like the weak-minded and all those comments are like originate from like, or like they all stem from like his play style, which isn't admirable. Like, he spends a lot of time complaining to the officials, flopping and shooting free throws. I understand free throws are a part of the game, but half the time his fouls are a result of him contorting or like flailing his body just to get a shot at the foul line. Like, it isn't like when Giannis or Carmelo Anthony, for like all my old NBA fans out there, were to go up strong and finish with contact. Like, those two, they attack the basket, and it's like they look to score. Embiid looks to get fouled. And for someone who's like as big as and as strong as he is, it begs the question more. Why are you playing like a little boy instead of playing like a grown man? That people expect you to play like. Like, all of that, along with his like troll-like persona and lack of playoff success, plays into a lot of the hate for Joel Embiid. I didn't even mention how this missed game affects Embiid's chances of being eligible for his MVP. Right now, he's the front runner of the award, but he also has missed the most games out of everyone who is in the front running of this award. Meaning that if he misses, so he's missed 11 games this season, and more than anyone out of the top 5, meaning that if he misses 6 more games, then he won't be eligible to win MVP. Obviously, if you are Embiid, that's really bad news, because if you miss the award just because you don't want to play, like, if he gets injured later on in the season, he doesn't have many games to like cushion that for him from losing the award, and then Jokic might just pass him in that span. Like, MVPs are like, I hate to say it, but they seem to be like the only guaranteed thing that Joel Embiid has a chance of getting. Like, at this rate, at least. I mean, we will see how the playoffs start, but given this incredibly weak move, I don't see it happening. I just don't. Given this ridiculous weak move, I just don't see it happening. Then again, like, I could be wrong, and it might be Tyrese Maxey that ends up showing up, and Tobias Harris ends up showing up. Who knows? More on the game itself, however. The Nuggets ended up with winning 111 to 105. Now, as the Sixers, I should also mention that along with Joel Embiid, they were missing Tyrese, they were missing Tobias, and they were missing Mo Bamba. So the fact that the bench was able to keep this game close and competitive long and throughout is actually very impressive to me. The bench really stepped up when their best players were out. Like, Paul Reed ended the game with the most random 30-point performance ever. He had like 30 and 13 with no free throws. It was straight mid-ranges and straight buckets. Like, he was on fire. He and Beverly, like, they were absolutely working the pick and roll. A lot of people find it really hard to believe that Patrick Beverly averaged 37, 8, and 6 and 6 in high school, which are true stats, by the way. But he definitely showed that on this side. He definitely showed that side in this game, where he was scoring the ball relatively and playmaking. He ended the game with 17 points and 11 assists. Okay, there we go. I apologize for that. I have no idea what happened there. My stream suddenly stopped for no reason. That was scary, but my apologies for that. But as I was saying, we should really put more respect on these players, because, like, they might be good at only one thing. Like, you might see them on the court and they might only be good at one thing, but they simply aren't. They aren't just good at one thing. Like, they can do multiple things, but it's just they focus on that specific thing. So it's like you have to focus on that specific thing. Like, you can't. In order to be successful in the NBA, you're gonna need your role players. You're gonna need all of those type of players in order to be successful. And if you don't have players that focus on certain skills that you need, like three-point shooting, defense, rebounds, all those type of things, then you're just not going to have a winning team, because you need players who are elite on all of those ends, and like in specific positions as well. And the bench played great, and when the rest of the team wasn't there. So if they could keep this same mentality of like everyone else can participate and do things like on the team to help, then I feel like that would definitely give them much more of a fighting chance to make a deep run in the playoffs. Because with Joel Embiid constantly isoing and hoping for a foul, I don't think that's not a very effective play style to work with. Like, it might be good in the regular season, but come playoff times, then it's not going to fly as much. Like, Kobe said it before, like running ISO heavy lineups, not so good for winning a championship. You need to get your whole team involved. And the rest of the team could have had this type of production, then they'll be good come playoff time. I was very surprised with how they played without Embiid, especially with Paul Reed. Like, that game was absolutely insane. Jokic ended with 26, 16, and 7. Jamal ended with 23 and 7. Michael Porter also showed up on the scoring sheet, but shot inefficient, getting 20 points on 19 shots. And Aaron Gordon had 18 on 8 shots, being hyper efficient as always. But other than those players, the rest of the team didn't show up, unlike the Sixers, who had multiple people showing up in double figures. And the bench showing up when Jamal and Jokic was like the main difference maker in a lot of these playoff wins. And they need that production from the bench. And it also relieves a lot of pressure from like the main players who also run the offense. So you definitely need that. But also like they recently because like they recently lost to the Knicks in a blowout. They might have the most wins in the West right now, but they do face off against the Bucks later tonight. And like I mentioned them getting blown out to the Knicks earlier because like they almost lost to Philly's bench. So now we have to see how they can handle against the Bucks and their starting lineup to see if they can still like they're still like a top competing team and they're still locked in. They need that. They need a big performance, and the Bucks also kind of need a big performance if they want to move up in the power rankings. More on that later. But like Denver might not have to worry that much now, but I feel like the blowout loss to the Knicks and like almost losing to the Sixers, it's like a sign like something's up. Like something's up with the team. Like it might just be that they're having an off night, but like what's going on? But Aside from that, we have to take another break real quick. I'm going to make sure that everything in the stream is like all right and fine. I have no idea what that connection issue was. Again, I apologize, but it's nothing I can really do here. But regardless, the third segment, that we have is going to be a recap of all of the games that happened over the weekend, or like the most important games that happened over the weekend. So go ahead and stay tuned for that. I will be right back.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
And we are back with the third segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast, where I'm going to, once again, as I said earlier, I'm going to talk about the matchups that went on last weekend, because obviously we were all way too busy watching football and watching Taylor Swift. So without further ado, let's go right ahead. I mentioned Denver being a team that needed to worry. And after this last weekend, I think there are like several teams that also might need to hit the panic button. Like, the Nuggets aren't one of them that need to hit that panic button, like the panic button, but they do need to stay on their toes just a little bit. The Heat are a team I mentioned before that are capable of making deep playoff runs despite being a low seed, and they've proven it making it to the finals with Jimmy, despite being an underdog in a lot of those series. However, they lost in a blowout to the Knicks. A lot of people are losing in blowouts to the Knicks recently. It came as a sacrifice from the Knicks, however, as they lost Julius Randle to a shoulder being dislocated. So it's not one, but two teams that need to hit that panic button. Because not only does Miami have to Miami have to face the fact that they lost to the Knicks, who are a great team now, but they're like they aren't one of the top teams that I think have a chance to make it all the way to the conference finals, like the Bucks and the Celtics, because they are running the East. So if they're having this much trouble against New York, imagine how much trouble they're going to have against some of the other teams in the East. But apart from the Miami Heat needing to enter panic mode, the Knicks might need to enter panic mode because now Julius Randle is hurt. Me personally, I'm not a big fan of Julius Randle. I'm not even going to lie to you. I do not like Julius Randle's game. I think it's lazy. I think it's weak. I think it's slow. I think it's not it. I don't get the thrill of watching him because there are times where, like, if he's not hitting his shots, he just doesn't play defense. And his effort is just lacking sometimes, especially on the defensive end. He's not that strong of a rebounder as I think he should be. And everything, like, he doesn't even shoot beautifully left-handed. Now I'm just nitpicking, but regardless, like, I don't really find, like, I don't find the aspects of his game all that intriguing to me. So I personally think the Knicks are going to be fine, because not only do they still have like a good enough team and good enough players like around them with the OG Anunoby trade recently coming in, but they also still have Jalen Brunson, who was their leading scorer with 32 and is known for his elite scoring. So while the final score was 125-109, it was still a close game, like relatively like throughout. Like, it was a game of runs, I guess you could say. Like, it was good ball between both teams. It's just that the Knicks happened to go on the run at just the right time when they needed it. But a team who so you might argue that, like, okay, if it was a game of runs and like the Knicks just so happened to go on a run late in the fourth, then it's like that could have gone either way. So I'll give it that. Maybe they don't need to panic that much, but a team that definitely should panic right now is the Boston Celtics. The Boston Celtics, they recently matched up against the Clippers while at home in Boston, and they ended up losing in a blowout. This was the second team that was able to beat the Boston Celtics in their home court. Both of them were Western Conference teams. Now, obviously, I like to have a streak alive, and I know that keeping a streak is very difficult, but it's also been proven to be difficult for teams to win in that stadium because you have a streak. So it should sort of, to me, it kind of cancels out, kind of. Tatum ended with 21 and 11, but Brown ended with 8 and 3 of 13. Drew wasn't much better either, going 2 for 11 for 7 points. There was no Kristaps this game, but let's be real, with the production that Jaylen Brown and Drew Holiday were giving, they were probably not going to win with Kristaps anyway. The only reason why the score isn't worse than what it already is because the Celtics went on a little run in garbage time in the fourth quarter, where they went and scored 36 points. And they were still losing by so many points. So this Clippers team, like, it could really be a problem. I'm very tempted to say that they could end up winning the whole thing, but I cannot trust that team in the postseason enough to say that. I don't know what it is. I just think, like, I can't trust them. But I do think that these are their best chances right now. The Clipper Stars, like, they really showed more, like, for this game on the defensive end than they did on the offensive side, strapping Jason Tatum to only 21 and Drew and Brown to barely getting 10 points, respectively. There wasn't, like, one individual that had a great game, like how I mentioned Luka's game with the Hawks, and everyone all around sort of did what they needed to do, even with, like, how badly both sides were shooting. Like, they were still able to make up for it. At least, the Clippers were definitely able to make up for it. It was more of a defensive battle. These teams have great perimeter defenders, so it makes sense how the shooting tonight from both teams might not have been that great. And the Celtics and the Clippers ended with only 10 threes made respectively. Just to give you excuse me. Just to give you guys an idea of, like, how many threes they've been making and just how bad the shooting was in this game. The Celtics should definitely worry about this matchup in the playoffs. And I think this is the perfect matchup if you're both sides, honestly. Like, every player can guard every player on this roster. I feel like it. And it's really going to come down to who has the good night and who can have more good nights. That's really what if this final series were to happen, that's what it would come down to. And, like, you might be saying, like, oh, well, that's why it needs to come down with every series. But, like, you guys know what I mean. Like, it's either Jason Tatum completely locks down Kawhi or Kawhi completely locks down Tatum. It's one of those two. And they need to happen in order for either of those sides to win. Like, it'll be Jaylen Brown against Paul George. Then it'll be Russ. And actually, wait, no. It would be Tatum. Then it would be Tatum on Kawhi. Then it would be Paul George on Jaylen Brown. Then it would be Harden on Drew, and then it would be Westbrook on, obviously he'll come off the bench, so it would be Man on Derek White. So they have a lot of the Boston Celtics. Like, the fear about Boston is their perimeter defense. The same thing with the Clippers. Like, I mean, Harden doesn't really have that perimeter defense, but Paul George and Kawhi Leonard definitely do, along with, like, some flares of Russell Westbrook. Whenever Westbrook isn't, like, trying to get a rebound, he can play some decent defense. However, this matchup, again, is all dependent if all these players can overcome the playoff bugaboos. Like, as I mentioned before with the Clippers and Harden, they've been notorious for missing, for failing when the light shines the brightest, and they're like the Niners of the NBA, the Celtics. We can put it that way. Actually, wait, no. Yes, yeah, they're the Niners of the NBA in the sense that every team, or every single one of their fans, they think they have a shot, and they legitimately do because of their team and their rosters. But at the end of the day, they end up falling short and not winning the whole thing. That's what San Fran has a tendency of doing, and that's what Boston has a tendency of doing. And the same thing kind of applies with the Clippers, other than, like, the Clippers not necessarily always having a good roster. But when they do, they always end up falling short. And the individual players, Harden and Westbrook, are very well known for falling short. So I'm very, like, skeptical on these guys, on these two teams in the playoffs. Similar to how the Niners haven't, like, won a Super Bowl in the 90s, but are still, like, good enough to have rosters and compete. The Celtics saw a championship in 2008, but other than that, they haven't seen one since the 80s. So, like, obviously, 2008, it's pretty recent ago, but it's not that recent ago. Like, I can't help but notice the pattern between, like, those two teams constantly, like, not being able to meet the moment. And even though they have a lot of trophies, like, to their name, like, it's crazy to me. In other news last night, the Pistons were able to beat the Thunder in a 120-104 win. Without Cade Cunningham, they were able to beat one of three teams with the most wins in the Western Conference. Jalen Duren was their leading scorer with 22 points along with 21 rebounds. Shai once again put up 30 but wasn't as efficient shooting the ball this night as he usually has been. Jalen Williams also showed up with 20 points, but other than that, offensively, there was nothing going for OKC. Chet ended with only 9 points and was the third leading scorer. So that should definitely put into perspective just how bad the scoring was. Because if 9 points is your third leading scorer, then like, no, that's not going to win you any ball games. Obviously, this is probably like where you hit the panic button if you're Oklahoma. Because how can you take a top team seriously this year when they lose to the Pistons? I don't care what kind of seed you are. Losing to the Pistons this year is a big no-no if you are trying to compete. Especially if you are trying to compete. You do not lose to the Pistons. And not only that, but they got blown out by the Pistons. So it's even worse because they lost worse than anyone else lost to the Pistons at this point. Like, I've been pretty high on OKC through the year, but after this, I think you might have to hit that panic button. Like, the team didn't show up, and it was against the worst team in the league, coming off of historic losing streak. That team coming off a historic losing streak. Like, if they don't show up against a bad team, what if the lights are even brighter in the playoffs against a good team? I was skeptical about them being able to do this in the postseason only because Shai hasn't had a good postseason because his team was never good enough to make it. But this makes me even more skeptical to the point where I think that they have a chance to flop out, like how Memphis flopped out against LA in the last postseason, and when the Lakers beat them. OKC's most probable L's have been from the Lakers. So depending on how the seedings work again, if they get the 7th seed and they match up against OKC, or like if they get 7th or 8th seed match up against OKC, there's a possibility that OKC might get eliminated. I mean, the Lakers are 2-1 against them right now. Like, losing to the Pistons, here's how bad it is losing to the Pistons. They already have as many losses as the 1, the 2, and the 3 seed of the East do combined. Like, that's how bad it is. That's how terrible it is. Minnesota lost to another bad team as well. This time it was the San Antonio Spurs. Ant finished the game with 32 and 12. Cat ended with 19, along with Rudy Gobert also getting 19. It wasn't enough for Victor, who had 23 and 10, along with Devin Vassell, who had 25. Neither side played relatively bad. The Wolves shot over 50 from 3, so it's not like it was really like a bad game between these guys. And they lost. The Wolves lost by only 1 point. It's just clear that the production from Cat is one that, like, it's not what we expected from him, and it's what costed them this game. If Karl Anthony Towns has a little bit more on offensively, then they win this game. And not only that, if he would have hit that shot, that step back 3 towards the end, then they would have won this game. But again, if he would have had the night where he averages usual productions, then this would have been an easy win. No questions asked. They were really close to winning in the end, but they ended up giving up a foul, and that resulted in a free throw. So obviously they ended up making 1 of 2, but they ended up missing the other one. And then the Timberwolves came down the court, and then they ended up missing. They really, obviously, like now, if you're the Wolves, I definitely hit that panic button because they've been another team that I've been hyping as well, and they've sort of taken that same route as OKC, where they lose to a really bad team. They recently lost to the Hornets, and now they're losing to the Spurs. Victor being the only bright spot on the team right now, like, this should have been easy for the Wolves. They have this matchup Gobert to deal. They have the great matchup in Gobert to deal with him. Like, if they can't meet the moment against bad teams, how do I know that they'll do it against the good ones when the lights shine the brightest and it matters most? They also have the Wolves also have playoff bugaboos. I remember the last time that they were in the playoffs when they were going up against Memphis. The T-Wolves ended up blowing 2 20-point leads in the same game, and they ended up losing. Like, that game, I watched that game. It was unreal to me because of how quickly they were, like, scoring, and then just how much they stopped scoring, and then how much they were scoring again, and then how much they would stop scoring again. It was like, it was weird. But with that, we are out of time in the first segment. Tune in for the fourth segment where I will be talking about the NBA power rankings. And with that, I will be right back. And we are back to the fourth and the final segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast. And in the final segment, we are going to be talking about the NBA Power Rankings. Now, before I do that, let me just go ahead real quick and see if the NBA posted them earlier today. And yes, they did. They just recently updated their Power Rankings. As they do every Monday, but I will go ahead and explain further on in the segment real quick. So, essentially what happened last week when I did this was that they were already, I believe I did it Monday, that I did this exact same segment before, and the power rankings, they did not update yet, and now that they have, I'm going to still give you the roster. I'm going to still give you the power rankings that were from last week and how they changed into this week. So I'll go ahead and do that real quick right after I once again remind you guys to please tip and donate once again in the link in the description below. That is streamelements.com/gsmcsportsnetwork./tip. Makes the show much more interactive between myself, the host, and you guys, the viewers. Once it really helps the show out. If you enjoy this episode, please follow, subscribe, and watch more of our podcasts. But without further ado, let's go right ahead into the power rankings. So like I said before, the last time I did these power rankings, the power rankings were off of the week before, so that would be power rankings 2 weeks ago. The power rankings that I have on this list currently are from last week, and I will reveal the ones that have come this week, the ones that have just been released. So the ones last week, Boston was number 1, Clippers were 2, Sixers were 3. Oh, and you know what? I'll include what they were in the week before. So Boston moved up to 1 after being 2. The Clippers moved up to 2 after being 5. The Sixers moved up to 3 after being 8. The Nuggets moved down to 4 after being 3. The Thunder moved all the way down to 5 after being 1. And then Minnesota moved all the way down to 6 after being 4. The Bucks are the only team that have not changed, and they've remained the same. They're at 7, which makes zero sense to me because I feel like they are so much better than just 7. The Pelicans moved down from 6 to 8. The Phoenix Suns move up from 14 to 9, and the Mavs stay. Actually, no, the Mavs are the other team that stay the same. My apologies. So those were the rankings from. Those were the power rankings from last. Those were the power rankings from last week. So without further ado, I might as well go ahead and give you the power rankings of this week. So Number 1 is the Clippers. Now, I fully expected that the Clippers would end up taking the number 1 seed from Boston simply because they beat Boston at home, and Boston's really difficult to beat at home. So I'm really not surprised with the Clippers being the number 1 rated team in the power rankings right now. Go Clips, even though I don't want them to necessarily go anywhere. But regardless, then second is Boston Celtics, obviously dropping from 1 for reasons that I've already said before. No need to dwindle on that. The Denver Nuggets moved all the way up to 3, which is honestly very surprising to me because I figured that the Sixers would take that 3rd spot instead of Denver, and Denver would stay at 4th. But maybe the Sixers are going to end up coming in at 4th. I don't know. I'm looking at this list live right now. Yep, the Sixers end up coming in at 4th. So they end up taking a tank for, I guess because their bench lost to Denver. That's why Denver gets the slight edge. But again, like the Sixers bench was able to make it competitive. So the fact that the bench was able to make it competitive against starters shows that like the starting lineup must be really good, right? So that's 4, and we move on to 5, which is OKC, which I'm surprised has remained the same. I'm honestly surprised that OKC has remained the same simply because of how badly they lost to the Pistons. But then again, the rest of the teams under them, they're like really, they might be a little bit suspect. But I'm very surprised that Oklahoma City stayed the exact same. But at 6 is the Milwaukee Bucks. I expected them to move up at least once after their recent games. No surprises there. They've been playing really decent. They've been playing really well. They could play better, which says a lot because they're the 2nd team in the East, and I think they could play better. Minnesota moves down to 7 after being ranked 6, which honestly is generous for them, seeing as how they lost to Charlotte and the Spurs. I would have personally taken them out of the top 10 entirely. And I would have replaced it with the New York Knicks, who are actually the 8th on this list. Wow, look at that. They jump all the way up from 12 all the way up to 8. Nice. So obviously, like the Knicks, they're rolling. The trade worked out, proved to be a success. They're ranked higher than Phoenix, who hasn't moved from last week, which kind of makes sense. Recently their games have been a little bit iffy. Like Devin Booker has his productions obviously, but for some reason they just don't end up winning the games that he scores so many points in, and I don't understand why. It's so weird that it only happens to him. He scored 71 at one point. They lost. He scored 60 at one point. They lost. 70 in a completely different season, by the way. Don't think he scored 70 this season. He didn't do that yet. Just wait. Just wait. Might happen. Who knows? And then the 10th team is the Cleveland Cavaliers. Now, they moved the Mavs completely out of the top 10. Like, oh my, they're all the way down to 14. Good Lord. But we'll only focus on like the top 10. I really thought that the Cavs would be over the Knicks, but again, being 10 and not even being completely healthy is really, really good because Darius Garland, if I remember correctly, Darius Garland is still out. Make sure that I am correct on that without my internet losing a leg. And yep, I'm correct. He has still been out. I have no idea how bad his injury is or what exactly is the story behind it. If he's just sitting games and whatnot, like doing what Joel Embiid does at this point, but he's injured, he's hurt, and the Cavs have still been winning without him, which is honestly pretty impressive, seeing as how the rest of the team is. Actually, no. The rest of the team is actually structured really solidly. It's the star power that I wanted to say, that Donovan Mitchell's star power, and his play style fitting into that lineup. It's really, it's crazy to me how he was able to he was able to bring success to the Cavs when nobody else could other than LeBron James. This is essentially the first time in decades that the Cavs have actually been a very well-respected team without LeBron to guide them. So I think it's very impressive what he's doing, and I think it's very impressive that he's doing it without his star point guard. Now, obviously, we still have more time, so we can go ahead and dabble into the other power rankings. That the Pelicans moved all the way down from 8 to 11, which honestly makes sense. They just lost in a blowout to the Bucks and CJ McCollum did not have a very good game whatsoever. I remember that specifically, but I'm just checking the final score real quick. My phone won't load it. Doesn't matter. Regardless, they lost in a huge blowout against. The story behind it was C.J. McCollum and Damian Lillard going up against each other after their tenure in Portland, and now they're finally out of Portland and actually in scenarios where they each can win a playoff game, or not a playoff game, but like they could actually win several playoff series. That's what I should say, because Portland has won series, but they haven't really made many deep playoff runs with Dame on the roster, unfortunately. The Pacers are at 12, even without Tyrese Halliburton, which is, with how they've been playing, I guess it makes sense. They moved up a ranking spot, however, which I don't see how. The Kings moved all the way up from 17 to 13, which is a pretty big jump, if I do say so. And it might actually be the biggest jump on this list. I wouldn't be surprised if it's the biggest jump from ratings on this list. Let me check real quick. Yep. That would be one of the biggest jumps on this list, other than the top 10 from being OKC dropping down from 1 through 4, but or 1 through 5, pardon me, but yep. Pistons ranked dead last, the Wizards ranked 3rd. Yep. Every team so far is where I expect them to be in these power rankings. As of right now, these power rankings are really good. I definitely see this as the Clippers are definitely the best team in the NBA right now, with the Boston Celtics being 2nd. And the only thing that I would probably change is flip-flopping between Denver and the 76ers. And I would put Denver a little bit lower and the Sixers a little bit higher, simply because their bench was, in my opinion, much better and had a much better night. I don't think their starters are better. I don't think the starters are better than. I don't think Philly's starters are if they matched up against each other, are better against the Nuggets starters. But their bench definitely showed that they were. The bench showed that they were a very competent and a very strong bench. So obviously, it's I don't think the Thunder deserve to change, obviously, because of that terrible loss. They deserve to go down. The Bucks are a little bit they aren't playing very well, but at the same time, I don't really. It's hard to see them as ranked 6 behind OKC. In fact, you know what? I might actually go ahead and flip those two, Oklahoma City and the Milwaukee Bucks, because at least Milwaukee doesn't lose to Detroit. So I might just flip-flop between those. So now we have, and then Minnesota. I might put the Knicks over them, just because I've seen the Knicks make noise in the playoffs, and I think they are the better team. But I'm honestly I wouldn't mind if it's 7 and 8. They're both neck and neck. They're both right there. And the Knicks did make a jump from 12 all the way up to 8, which is honestly very impressive. Phoenix, I wouldn't change a day. And Cleveland is in a pretty good spot as well. So with those power rankings, I think hold on, let me just find the name of the author real quick of the article. I believe it's John Schumann. Yes, John Schumann. Pardon me if I mispronounced that name. But John Schumann definitely did a great job with this list. I really like it. Great list. definitely expect me to do these segments like all the time, like on Mondays afterwards, because I feel like I like this segment. I like always having going over the power rankings and seeing like who we think, or like who the media thinks is the best team in the NBA. But with that, we are out of time for this podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. And once again, do not forget to like the video and to subscribe and to follow the link below in the ticker and in the link. So I'm your host, Nelson, and as always, take care.